Chapter 13, Congress. We need to talk about Congress versus Parliament and make a comparison with the British Parliament. First, the British Parliament. Parliamentary candidates are selected by their parties. In order to become a candidate, you persuade your party to place your name on the ballot. Voters choose between national parties, not between multiple candidates within a single party. Members of Parliament select the Prime Minister, the Chief Executive, and other leaders, which are known as the government. Party members vote together on most issues. Renomination depends on remaining loyalty to party. Principal work is debate over national issues. Members have very little actual power, very low pay, and few staff resources. Congressional candidates run in a primary election with little party control over their nomination. Voting is for the candidate, not the party. The result is a body of independent representatives of districts or states. Members do not choose the chief executive. Voters indirectly elect the president. Power is decentralized and members are independent. Party discipline is limited, not enduring. The members' principal work is representation and action and not debate. And the members have a great deal of power, high pay, and significant staff resources. Here's Article 1, Section 8, or the Powers of Congress. I would suggest you familiarize yourself with these enumerated powers, especially Clause 18, which is the final clause in the second column, which is the implied powers doctrine, all right, or better known as the necessary and proper clause. The next thing we need to discuss is the evolution of Congress and the intent of the framers when they developed it. The intent of the framers was to oppose the concentration of power in a single institution. They wanted to balance large states and small states, so they set up a bicameral two-chamber system. And they expected Congress to be the dominant institution, which is obvious since it's Article 1 in the Constitution. They also wanted Congress to truly be decentralized, or allow for the protection of individual members and their constituencies, have a weak leadership, have rules allowing for delay, and much committee activity. The general trend has been towards decentralization, especially since the mid-20th century. The trend may not have been inevitable. Decentralization has not occurred in state legislatures. Changing organization of the House may have facilitated decentralization. The House itself wants the institution and its members to be powerful. It's large. It has 435 members. It makes it difficult for the House to be powerful without investing authority in small leadership groups. But if the small leadership group has too much power, then the individual members will not have power, so this has to be watched. The evolution of the Senate has escaped many of the tensions encountered by the House. It's a smaller chamber. It only has 100 members. In the 1800s, if you remember, through the Missouri Compromise and numerous compromises thereafter, there was a balance between slave and free states. The size of 100 precludes the need for a rules committee to set up debate and vote. And previous to 1913, senators were elected by the state legislature, which caused them to focus on jobs and contributions for their state. There is a major struggle in the Senate at that point in time about how its members should be chosen. They resolved with proposing the 17th Amendment and it then being ratified by the states, which means that the senators are directly elected by the population. Filibuster is another major issue, or discussing a bill or debating a bill, all right, either to kill it or to advance it. This is restricted by Rule 22, which was passed in 1917, all right, which allows a vote of cloture. But it used to be 60 senators that needed to be present. It is now 75 that need to vote and say, yes, stop the filibuster. It does not happen very often. The next thing we need to look at is who is in Congress. The beliefs and interests of individual members of Congress can actually affect policy. Gender and race. The House has become less male and less white. The Senate has been lower to change. Members of color, who often come from safe districts and have higher rates of re-election, may advance to leadership positions more quickly than women due to their greater seniority. Members of color became chairpersons of several important committees when Democrats regained majority party status in 2006. The other issue is incumbency. Membership in the Congress becomes a career. There was a low turnover by the 1950s, but then with the election of 1992 and 1994, that brought many new members to Congress. Redistricting after the 1990 census put incumbents in new districts they couldn't carry. You also have the anti-incumbency attitude of voters at that time. The Republican victory in 1994 occurred partially due to the South's shift to the Republican Party. Incumbents still have a huge electoral advantage. Most House districts are safe and not marginal. Senators are less secure as incumbents. However, over half of Senate incumbents won with over 60% or more of the vote in over half the elections since 1980. In 2008, nearly two-thirds of the Senate incumbents won with 60% or more of the vote. Voters may support incumbents for several reasons. One, they get more media coverage. Two, incumbents have greater name recognition owing to franking, travel to districts, and new news coverage. And three, members secure policies and programs for voter, which makes them fairly popular. The other issue is party. Democrats were beneficiaries of incumbency from 1933 to 2008, controlling both houses in 27 Congresses and at least one House in 29. Republicans have a tendency to run best in high turnout districts. Democrats have run better in low turnout ones. There is, however, an incumbent advantage increasing, and it's now benefiting both parties. Electoral convulsions do periodically alter membership, as in 1994. Voters opposed incumbents due to budget deficits, various policies, legislative executive bickering, and scandal, from the Wright and the Gingrich houses. Other factors were 1990 redistricting and Southern shift to voting Republican. In 2006, Democrats regained control of both houses of Congress. Voters were simply reacting to a very unpopular president, George W. Bush, blaming Republican leadership in Congress for leading the nation in the wrong direction. The conservative coalition of Southern Democrats and Republicans, however, now has very little influence. Many Southern Democrats have now been replaced by Republicans. Remaining Southern Democrats are as liberal as other Democrats, and the result has been a greater partisanship, especially in the House, and greater party unity in voting, no matter which party is in charge. How do members represent their voters? Well, members may be devoted to their constituents or act in accordance with their own beliefs, pressure groups, or congressional leaders. There are three views. The first is the representational view. The representational view states that members vote to please their constituents in order to secure re-election. This applies when constituents have a clear view and the legislature's vote is likely to attract attention. We do find correlations in roll call votes and constituency opinion for civil rights and social welfare legislation, but not for foreign policy. We also cannot predict that members from marginal districts will adhere to this philosophy or that members from safe districts will not be independent. Even if a member votes against constituent preferences, he or she can win re-election in other ways. The second form is the organizational view. When constituency interests are not vitally at stake, members primarily respond to cues from colleagues. Party is the principal cue, with shared ideological ties, causing each member to look to specific members for guidance. Party members of the committee sponsoring the legislation are especially influential. The third is the attitudinal view. The member's ideology determines his or her vote. House members are ideologically more similar to the average voter than are senators. The Senate is less in tune with public opinion and more likely to represent different bases of support in each state. From 1980 to the present, we've seen a rise of ideologically based conservative Republicans in both the House and the Senate. One of the things that we are seeing is a very polarized Congress. Members are increasingly divided by political ideology. A generation ago, the liberal faction included Republicans and the conservative faction included Democrats. Since 1998, Congress has been polarized along ideological and partisan lines. An attitudinal explanation of how Congress votes has increased in importance, and an organizational explanation is of decreasing importance. Polarization among members on the basis of political beliefs is greater than that of voters. Members are more likely to challenge, investigate, or denounce each other, and are less likely to negotiate over legislation or to reach compromise settlements. I think you can see that in the Congress you have now. Organization of Congress, parties and caucuses. The party organization of the Senate. First, you have the President pro tem, who presides. This is the member with the most seniority in the majority party. Leaders are the majority leader and the minority leader, elected by their respective party members. Majority leader schedules Senate business, usually in consultation with the minority leader. The majority leader, who is skilled at political bargaining, may acquire substantial influence over the substance of Senate business as well. There are also two party whips, a majority and minority. These keep the leaders informed, round up votes, and effectively count noses. Each party has a policy committee, schedules the Senate business, and sets priorities for bills. Committee assignments are handled by a group of senators, each for their own party. For the Democrats, it's the steering committee. For the Republicans, it's the committee on committees. Assignments are especially important for freshmen, and assignments emphasize ideological and regional balance. Other factors that are looked at are popularity, effectiveness on television, and favors owed, patronage. Party structure in the House. House rules give leadership more power. The Speaker of the House is the leader of the majority party and presides over the House. He decides who to recognize to speak on the floor. He rules on germaneness of motions. He assigns bills to committees subject to some rules. He influences which bills are brought up for a vote. He appoints members of special and select committees and has some informal powers. The majority leader and the minority leader are the leaders on the floor. There are also party whips in the House. Committee assignments and legislative schedule are set by each party. Democrats, it's done by the Steering and Policy Committee. Republicans divide the task between the Committee on Committees for committee assignments and a Policy Committee to schedule legislation. There's a strength in party structures. It's a loose measure of the strength of party structure and the ability of leaders to get members to vote together to determine party rules and organization. Okay. There's a big contrast with the House between the Senate and the House. The Senate has changed through changes in norms rather than changes in rules. The Senate now is less party-centered and less leader-centered and oriented, and more hospitable to freshmen, more heavily staffed, and more subcommittee oriented. We don't see that in the House. There were reforms and controversial committee assignments in the House for a long period of time. I will stop here, and then we will go to part 2.